Hi, and welcome. I'm Suzanne Biddiscombe, and I'm glad you're joining me for this presentation today. Before we begin, I want to be upfront about something important. What I'm sharing today is for informational and educational purposes only. This is not medical or mental health advice, and I'm not a licensed mental health therapist. That said, let me share a bit about my background. I do hold both an undergraduate and a graduate degree in psychology, and I worked as a traditional mental health counselor for many years. But over time, my interest in alternative modalities, specifically hypnotherapy and what are known as energy psychology techniques, led me to break away from traditional counseling. I came to believe these modalities were better suited to get to the subconscious conflicts that were driving people's negative beliefs, emotions, and behaviors. When I embraced these modalities over 17 years ago, over time, I came to discover that some people had what are called attachments or entities, and that's what led me into spirit release work. Today, we're going to focus specifically on one type of entity attachment, earthbound spirits. These are by far the most common type I encounter in my practice, and they're the best place to start if this is a new subject for you. By the time we're finished, you'll have a clearer picture of what earthbound spirits are, how they attach, what that looks like in real cases, and the science that supports this work. This is a subject that's been largely overlooked in the fields of psychology and hypnotherapy, and I think it's time we change that. So, whether you're curious about what else might be possible in healing work, or wondering if this could be relevant to your own life, there's something here for you. So let's get into it. And here they are, the foundational texts that made this work possible. These are the three books that created the bedrock of spirit release therapy as we know it today. Dr. William Baldwin's Spirit Releasement Therapy, released back in the 1980s, is really the foundational work. He established the structured protocols and frameworks still used today. Dr. Edith Fiore, The Unquiet Dead, was a game changer because she brought this work into the public conversation in a way that was both accessible and deeply compassionate. And Dr. Shakuntala Modi's Remarkable Healings, what she did was meticulously document case after case, giving us an extraordinary body of clinical evidence. If you want to go deeper into this subject after watching this presentation, these three books are where I'd start. They're all accessible even without a technical background. Now, let's get into what these researchers actually discovered, starting with a core concept that ties all of this work together. So here's where we really start getting into the core of it. Let me break this down in the simplest terms I can. So what is entity attachment? Let me put it as plainly as possible. It's when a non-physical consciousness, a spirit, an energy, merges with or attaches to a living person's energy field. I sometimes describe it as an uninvited guest who's taken up residence in your energetic space. They didn't knock, they didn't ask permission, and most of the time, you don't even know they're there. Now, there are actually three very distinct types of entity attachment: earthbound spirits, dark force entities, and alien entities. Each type behaves differently, has different motivations, and each one requires a completely different therapeutic approach. I covered the other two types in separate presentations. Today, we're focusing entirely on earthbound spirits, the most common type by far, and the ones I encounter most often in my practice. These are the foundation of spirit release work, and understanding them will give you the clearest entry point into this subject. So let's dive in. So we're going to focus on earthbound spirits. That's the best way to dive into this subject. Earthbound spirits, or EBS for short. And I want to start by taking the mystery and especially the fear out of this right away. An earthbound spirit is simply a person who has passed away, but for their own particular reasons, did not leave the earthly plane. That's really all it is. Maybe they were confused at the moment of death. Maybe they had unfinished business. Maybe they were so attached to a person or a place or a thing that they just stayed. Whatever the reason, their spirit didn't make the transition that normally happens after death. Understanding that simple fact is incredibly important because it completely changes how you feel about the whole topic. Once you truly grasp that these are just regular people who got stuck, not monsters, not demons, just people, you can approach both the subject and the treatment with compassion instead of fear. And compassion, as you'll see, is actually one of our most powerful tools in this work. And thinking about the word compassion, it brings us right to Dr. Fiore's beautiful description of exactly what we're talking about. In her groundbreaking book, The Unquiet Dead, she described these spirits as lost souls. And honestly, I don't think anyone has ever found a better way to say it. Two words that capture everything: the sadness of their situation, the fact that they need help, and the compassion we should bring to working with them. These are not demons. These are not evil forces. These are human beings, people who once had families, who had lives, who had hopes and fears, just like you and me, and they got stuck. Something went wrong at the moment of transition, and they stayed. Fiore's work was extraordinary. She documented hundreds upon hundreds of cases over her career, and her meticulous records really helped establish spirit release as a legitimate healing practice. Her contribution to this field honestly cannot be overstated. She gave us both the evidence and the language to talk about this work with credibility and heart. The natural next question is, how do these lost souls actually get inside a living person? So let's look at the mechanics of that. So let me try to explain how attachment actually happens. It's really key to both prevention and treatment. Let me walk you through this mechanism. How does an earthbound spirit actually get inside a living person? Well, it's not random and it's not magic. It requires an opening in the person's energy field. The three primary entry points are the head, the heart, and the gut system. And it's no coincidence that these are the three areas of the body most densely packed with neurons. We have massive concentrations of nerve cells in our brain, but also in our heart and our gut system. There's a reason people talk about gut feelings and heartbreak. These are real neurological centers. They're not just metaphors. Our nerve cells directly mirror our emotional state. So when we experience something overwhelming, trauma, deep grief, intense fear, a major shock, our energy field literally opens up in these areas. Think of it like a door that swings open when we're at our most vulnerable. And that opening creates what I call a resonance, a vibrational match between the lost soul and the living person. The spirit's energy and the person's energy start vibrating at the same frequency, and that resonance is the bridge that allows the attachment to happen. Now, hold on to that word resonance, because it's going to be the thread that runs through everything we discuss today. It comes up in the science section, it comes up in treatment. It's really the key to understanding all of this. So this next slide is one I think is particularly important because these are the real world signs that something might be going on beneath the surface. So how do you actually recognize when someone might have an entity attachment? Here are the symptoms that come up most consistently across cases, mine and those documented in the research. Unexplained low energy, and I mean truly unexplained, where the person has been to doctors and nobody can find a reason. Sudden character shifts or mood swings that seem to come out of nowhere. Inner voices or intrusive thoughts that feel foreign, like they don't belong to you. Turning to substances, alcohol, drugs, especially when the pattern starts or escalates for no clear reason. Impulsive behavior, memory problems, difficulty concentrating, sudden onset of anxiety, depression, or physical symptoms that conventional medicine just can't explain. Now, here's what's really important to notice. Look at that list. How many of those symptoms overlap with things that get diagnosed conventionally? Depression, anxiety, substance abuse, ADHD, dissociative disorders. The overlap is enormous, and that's exactly what makes this work both critical and challenging at the same time, because some of these people have been through years of treatment that isn't working, and nobody has thought to look at this angle. And one more thing worth mentioning. If you're having a strong emotional or physical reaction right now, just hearing this material, pay attention to that. It doesn't necessarily mean anything specific, but it's worth noting. Your body and your energy field are always giving you information. Let me make this more concrete with a real example from my practice. So let me bring all this to life with a real case, because theory is one thing, but seeing how it actually plays out with the real person is something else entirely. I want to walk you through a real exchange from one of my sessions. Janine, not her real name, was 52 years old, and during our spirit release session, an earthbound spirit named Jack came forward. He was just 14 when he died. I asked him his name, and Janine spoke it for him, Jack. When I asked how he died, his story poured out. He'd been fixing a wheel in a cart, and it got away from him and landed on him. He couldn't breathe. His mother was kneeling over him, crying, and he kept saying, "I'm right here, I'm right here." Then he described watching himself move away from his own body, looking back at his mother and his brothers. And his words were heavy with anger. It was such a dumb mistake. Notice what's happening here. Jack is completely in his life, referencing his age, his family, and the way he died. This is the freeze frame quality I mentioned earlier. He's stuck in that moment, reliving it, and the emotions he carried at death, the anger, the frustration, those became his ball and chain. Let me show you how that played out. So after that initial dialogue, more of Jack's story emerged, and here's where the parallels between Jack and Janine become really clear. Jack lived his life focused on gaining his father's approval. His belief that his father was disappointed in him created deep anger and bitterness, and that anger became the ball and chain that Dr. Baldwin describes. During our dialogue, Jack would shift between happy memories on the farm with his brothers and his close relationship with his mother, then cycle back to reliving his death and his father's disappointment. That oscillation between warmth and anger is very characteristic of the freeze frame state. Now here's the resonance. Janine struggled her whole life to gain her mother's approval. That need for approval carried into every relationship. Career disappointments, broken love relationships, never feeling valued or good enough. She had contentious, angry arguments with partners, followed by embarrassment and shame. She sought each man's approval, even financially supporting them to earn it. The same anger she felt towards her mother was the frequency that connected her to Jack. And here's the part that I find most remarkable. How Jack found his way to Janine and what changed after the release. Jack incorporated into Janine when she was a teenager, performing in the play Annie Get Your Gun. The bales of hay and Western theme on stage created the environmental resonance that drew Jack to her. Immediately after the session, Janine told me that when I asked Jack what drew him to her, the image of the bale of hay popped into her mind. That's the freeze frame at work. Jack was still connected to his farm, the life on the farm, and the stage setting triggered that connection. The outcome speaks for itself. Within a couple of weeks, Janine felt less angry, significantly more at peace, and more in control of her emotions. She said she just did not feel a need to push things so much with her partner. Months later, this dissipation of anger was still evident in how she discussed her relationships. And this is what spirit release work can do, and it demonstrates everything we've been talking about: the resonance, the freeze frame, and the power of compassionate release. So that gives you a real picture of what Earthbound Spirit work looks like in practice. It's gentle, it's compassionate, and when it works, the results can be remarkable. Now, the natural question is, where's the science behind all of this? Let me show you that this work is grounded in far more than personal experience alone. So let's get into the science, starting with something you can actually see. This is where it gets really exciting from a scientific perspective. Konstantin Korotkov is a Russian scientist who developed something called GDV technology, and that stands for gas discharge visualization. And what it does is remarkable. It can actually visualize the human biofield, the energy field, in real time, non-invasively, meaning nothing touches you, nothing hurts. It simply reads and displays your energetic state. What his research demonstrates is that something that energy healers have known intuitively for a very long time, but now we can see it and measure it. We are fundamentally energetic beings. We are constantly both conducting and receiving energy. We're not solid, static objects. We're dynamic fields of energy in constant interaction with everything around us. And here's the part most directly relevant to everything we've been talking about. When we experience emotional or physical imbalance, stress, trauma, grief, illness, Korotkov's technology shows measurable openings, gaps, and distortions in the energy field. You can literally see them on the screen. And those openings are exactly the entry points we discussed earlier, the places where entity attachment can occur. So what healers have been observing for decades, this technology can now confirm visually and scientifically. And it's just the beginning. Wait until you see what HeartMath Institute has discovered. So from biofield imaging, we move to what might be the most well-established body of research in this entire space. The HeartMath Institute's work on the heart's electromagnetic field. When we're trying to understand how one person's consciousness could draw to itself the consciousness of another person, even one no longer in physical form, HeartMath Institute gives us some of the most compelling scientific evidence available. They've been studying the biomagnetic field of the human heart for over 40 years. 40 years of rigorous, peer-reviewed research. And what they've proven, not suggested, not hypothesized, but proven, is that the heart is not just an organ that pumps blood. It is essentially another brain. Using scientific instruments that simply didn't exist a few decades ago, they've measured the electromagnetic field that every human heart generates. This field extends well beyond the body. It radiates outward into the space around you, interacting with the fields of other people. Perhaps even more significant is their discovery of the heart-brain interface. There is a constant, active, two-way dialogue happening between the heart and brain, with each organ influencing the other's function through 4 distinct pathways: neurologically, biochemically, biophysically, and energetically. What this means is profound. We are not isolated beings. We are constantly broadcasting our emotional state through our heart's electromagnetic fields and constantly receiving the broadcasts of others. And that has enormous implications for understanding entity attachment, and especially for understanding what protects us from it. And here's where HeartMath's research gets really practical, because they didn't just discover the field, they discovered what makes you resilient within it. Here's the key finding, and I think this is one of the most empowering things I can share. HeartMath discovered that when a person maintains positive emotions, they are not degraded or affected by negative energy sources coming from other people. But that protection only works when the person can sustain what HeartMath calls a state of coherence. So what is coherence? It's a state where heart, mind, and emotions are all energetically aligned and working cooperatively together. Think of it like an orchestra where every instrument is playing in harmony versus one where everyone's playing a different tune. Coherence is indicated by sustained positive emotional and mental stability, not a momentary good feeling, but a constant, consistent, maintained state of balance. And here's what's counterintuitive. When you're in this coherent state, you actually become more sensitive to the electromagnetic signals coming from other people's hearts. You'd think that would make you vulnerable, but the opposite is true. When people can sustain this coherent balance, they become more internally stable and less vulnerable to being negatively affected by the fields around them. Their increased internal stability acts as a shield. Now think about what this means for entity attachment. Coherence is protection. Maintaining positive emotional alignment doesn't just feel good, it literally makes you less susceptible to negative energetic influence, including entity attachment. So for those who need strong scientific evidence, HeartMath Institute is certainly providing it. Now let me connect this to the broader picture. So like I said, let me weave together what we've learned from HeartMath with an even bigger picture, the quantum perspective, or the new science on how reality actually works. Let's follow the logic through. If a person is emitting negative emotions through the electromagnetic field of their heart, HeartMath has shown that they become susceptible to the negative emotions of others. An interface is created, a connection, an opening. And here's what's remarkable. Both indigenous tribes and ancient cultures around the world believed, independently of each other, that what they called possession could only occur when the person was unstable, physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. When you lay HeartMath's findings alongside these ancient traditions, the alignment is striking. Now, let's zoom out to the bigger picture possible. The classic physics model, the Newtonian worldview, says we live in a universe of separate objects, separate people, where interaction only happens through physical force and separation defines our reality. The quantum model says something completely different. It says there's no true separation, not between objects, not between people, not even between mind and matter. We draw experiences, people, and energies to us that match our own frequency. We attract what resonates with us. HeartMath has essentially proven this in a very measurable way. We are constantly interfacing with the world through the electromagnetic field of our hearts, broadcasting our emotional state like a radio signal. And here's where my own experience confirms the science beautifully. Based on over 200 spirit release sessions, I can say this with certainty. Whatever the primary negative emotion a person presents with, anger, fear, sadness, grief, shame, the attached entity always matches that primary emotion. Always. Angry person, angry entity. Fearful person, fearful entity. The resonance is the connection. It's not random, and it's not mysterious once you understand the science behind it. So there's one more piece of this scientific puzzle, and I think it ties everything together perfectly. So let me walk you through the specific reasons why hypnotherapy is the tool of choice, and how each of our three key researchers used it in their own way. Hypnotherapy is the absolute cornerstone of spirit release work, and the reason why is because it's so straightforward. It's the only method that gives us direct, reliable access to the subconscious mind, the exact level of consciousness where entity attachments operate. Think about it. If someone has an attachment operating beneath their conscious awareness, talking about it consciously is not going to reach it. Standard psychological assessments aren't designed to detect it. Medication can mask the symptoms, but it's not addressing the actual cause. Hypnotherapy cuts through all of that and goes directly to the source. Each of our three key researchers used hypnotherapy, but each brought their own genius to it. Dr. Baldwin developed a complete structured protocol, a structured step-by-step method for guiding people into a relaxed trance state, then systematically scanning for and dialoguing with any attached entities. His work created the modern practice of spirit release therapy as a structured discipline. Dr. Fiore used regression hypnosis, taking people back through their experiences layer by layer, uncovering exactly when and how the attachment first occurred. And her approach was profoundly compassionate. She guided the lost souls towards the light rather than using forceful removal. And Dr. Modi documented hundreds of documented cases where hypnotherapy revealed entity attachments that had been completely missed by every other form of diagnosis. Some of these people had been in the mental health system or the general health system for years with no resolution, and hypnotherapy uncovered what no one else had found. In my own practice, hypnotherapy is the single most effective tool for getting past the conscious mind's natural defenses and connecting directly with whatever entity is present. But a common concern is this: what does the experience actually feel like? Am I going to lose control? Let me put that to rest right now. So let's go over the most common concern about hypnotherapy. I think we need to address this head on. During hypnotherapy, you are always in control, always, full stop. And I cannot emphasize this enough, because the single biggest barrier to people seeking this kind of help is the fear that they'll lose control. And that fear is based entirely on fiction. Stage hypnosis shows and Hollywood movies have created this image of the hypnotist as some kind of puppet master who takes over your mind. That's not how therapeutic hypnosis works. Not even close. Here's the reality. In order to enter a hypnotic state, the person must be willing to follow the guide's suggestions. If someone doesn't want to go there, they won't. It's that simple. You cannot be hypnotized against your will. This is a cooperative process. I'm a guide, a facilitator. Your own mind does the real work. And at any point, you can simply open your eyes and stop. You're never trapped, never stuck, never out of control. And here's what surprises people the most. The conscious mind stays fully engaged the entire time. You're not asleep. You're not unconscious. People almost universally say afterward that they were aware of everything. They could hear my voice clearly. They knew exactly where they were. They remember every detail of the session. That conscious awareness is actually essential because it means you can report what you're experiencing in real time as we navigate the subconscious together. So with all of that, the science behind Earthbound Spirit attachment, the treatment process, and the safety of the process, I hope you now have a much clearer picture of what this work involves and why it matters. I'm going to leave you with my contact information. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to watch this presentation. And I hope it's opened up new possibilities in how you think about healing and consciousness. So if you want to go deeper into this subject, I'd encourage you to read my ebook, An Introduction to Spirit Release Work. It expands on what we've covered here today with additional case studies weaved in along with the scientific research that supports this work, highlighting the pioneering contributions of Dr. Baldwin, Dr. Fiore, and Dr. Modi. It's a short read, but it pulls everything together in a way that I think will really deepen your understanding. Now, if anything here resonated with you, if you have questions, want to explore this further, or want to learn more about this approach, I would genuinely love to hear from you. You can reach me through my website at thesourceforchange.org, by email at thesourceforchange@hotmail.com, or by phone at 561-398-1139. All of my sessions are conducted through Zoom, so it truly doesn't matter where you are in the world. We can work together. And I want to thank you for your time and your open mind.